Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, December 4th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking about those CFP rankings that came out yesterday. The thing that I think a lot of people did not want to happen happened. Alabama is back in the field, and we'll see what happens from here. Obviously, that ACC championship is going to be huge. We'll talk about all of it here in a second. Then we'll get to the early signing day, a huge day in the world of recruiting. Obviously, a lot of guys signing their letter of intents today. A lot of teams moving up in the rankings. Texas looking for that number one class in the country. Michigan making a lot of moves today that could be very impactful for the future around there. Boise State UNLV. Want to talk about that in the third segment. Want to give it a little bit of big game breakdown treatment here. Obviously, for a playoff spot for that G5 playoff spot, going to be a huge moment for both those programs. Then we'll get to the other G5 title games. We have four others in the Conference USA, American, MAC, and Sun Belt. Want to break those down and give you picks for those as well as we head into this weekend. And then we got a couple of questions as we head into this weekend. What's the most impactful title game? Who needs to step up the most? What's the game of the week? A lot of different things I want to break down at the very end of the show. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use the super chat. Click that $sign at the bottom of the Sports Network chat. Add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop on the screen, and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive, especially with early signing day. A lot of different stuff flying around, so definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. Utilize that if you would like to. But let's go ahead and jump into these rankings. Let's talk about that first, and then we will get to early signing day. We'll get to all the craziness that is going to go on today. But let's start with the rankings here, and the thing that a lot of people I think wanted to avoid has happened. Alabama is back in the field, and let's just start with the rankings overall. Then we'll get to a little bit more about the actual playoff field. But Memphis and Army get the respect that they likely deserve at the very end of the season. Obviously, Army has the game this weekend, so could fall out of this if they were to lose. But at the end of the day, been a really incredible story from both those teams. Memphis had a very tough start to the year, but was able to kind of rebound. A huge moment for them, and definitely deserves the respect to be in this ranking at the very end. Syracuse, Colorado, Illinois, all kind of in the same boat. They all just kind of had a great season, now are looking to possibly push it to 10 wins. I know Colorado is going to have just about everyone playing in their bowl game. Haven't heard necessarily anything from Syracuse and Illinois. Will be interesting to see if guys like Kyle McCord or a guy like Pat Bryant is going to suit up for those games. But definitely a really fun trio there. Three teams that were a ton of fun to watch this year, and definitely getting a little bit of love at the end of the CFP process. UNLV, you're in a win-in scenario, no doubt about it. You being ahead of Army takes care of any question of that being the case. You were playing Boise State for a spot in the CFP. Could be just a huge moment for the Rebels and kind of a huge comeback. Coming off that Syracuse loss, it felt like they were kind of gone and done in the CFP race, but with all the craziness that's happened in the group of five this year, they found their way back up. Even with two losses, they're still in this thing and can avenge one of those losses this weekend against Boise State, and we'll talk about that game a little bit later. But Missouri is Missouri. I don't think we have to talk about them too much. They're a little bit of a resume booster. I'm not necessarily saying they shouldn't be here, but definitely a team that I think we all just know is going to be here. I think we all know we don't necessarily love that they're here. But at the end of the day, BYU's in no man's land at 18, and frankly, so is kind of South Carolina and Ole Miss at 14 and 13. They're in really, really tough spots as you move forward. None of those teams are going to be able to make the dance. Obviously, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and those other two teams we'll talk about here in a second was a big topic of conversation. At the end of the day, I didn't have a big problem with where they landed. I think Ole Miss has a reason to be upset, but at the end of the day, you lose to a 4-8 Kentucky, that's really going to hurt your chances. But at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how all of this kind of works out, because you do have those three teams from 15 to 17. Those are all in the win-and-then scenarios. You know, Arizona State, Iowa State this weekend, and then Clemson obviously trying to kind of shock the world, find their way into the dance at 9-3 or at 10-3 if they were to get the win, and you're in a position where you're probably going to be that 12th team. You're probably going to be the team on the outside looking in. Maybe you'll get a little bit of a bump over the Big 12 champion. We'll see how all of that kind of shakes out this weekend, but definitely something to watch. You know, will Clemson get that bye at the 4 spot? Will they stay below the Big 12 champion and then be the 12, or be in a position to have to go on the road to a Penn State or to a Notre Dame or to an Oregon possibly? So a lot of different things at play here in the bottom half. Obviously, not the most impactful part of the rankings by any means. Definitely the group that is definitely on the outside looking in of this thing, but then you have kind of the logjam of those two up there, and then these two down here with 12 and 11 of Miami and Alabama. Frankly, I would have put Miami all the way at the bottom of these four teams between South Carolina, Ole Miss, Miami, and Alabama. I did that in my rankings yesterday. I would have done it in these. Understand why they didn't. I understand you kind of want a little bit of a buffer. Maybe it's a little bit of just sending a message to everyone that this is where we're drawing the line. Alabama's above it. South Carolina and Ole Miss are below it. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think it makes all that big of a difference. I would have had Miami below the other two, but understand why they didn't. Miami, you're effectively out. I don't think any turn of events that could happen this weekend that would find your way into this thing. You are in a really, really bad spot moving forward. And it's one of those things. You lose 2 of your last 3 games to 2 unranked opponents, you're going to have an issue. Obviously, Syracuse is a team that's kind of kicked up into the rankings this week, but when they played them, was an unranked team, definitely a team that they probably should have been able to take care of, and they weren't able to. So I'm not necessarily super disagreeing with that. I fully understand where they're coming from with that one. Bama, you're in right now. I think you would likely fall out if Clemson were to beat SMU and SMU gets the at-large bid. We'll see what happens there. SMU's at 8. I feel like that's enough of a gap, but definitely one of those things where maybe it's just the margin of victory for Clemson one way or the other if SMU were to fall out. I would firmly put them in almost regardless of what happened this weekend. I understand that's not the sentiment of everyone, so we'll see what happens there. Obviously, I think if SMU loses, they should be in. If Clemson loses, obviously Alabama will find their way in. SMU will be that 3rd seed. But for Boise State, you're in a great spot. You are in a win and buy scenario, no doubt about it. You have enough space between you and Arizona State where there's really no chance of you losing that bye if you get a win. You'll probably be the 4 seed, maybe the 3 if Clemson were to lose this weekend and not jump ahead of you. I don't think that would happen, so you would be in a good position to possibly get the 3 seed if Clemson were to win this weekend and you would slide up one more spot. Would be a little bit crazy. I don't necessarily love that Boise State gets one of the buys, but understand when you look at the resumes, they stack up just a little bit better. I just don't think it's the right 4 teams. I think it should be the 4 champions from the Power 4, but understand that Boise State's had a great year, so it'll be interesting to watch what happens there. Indiana, you're in a great spot. I don't think you're really moving that much. Maybe you slide down to 11. Maybe you stay at 10, the 10 seed, not the 10 spot, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The Tennessee-Ohio State debate was one that was kind of going around the Twitter sphere the last couple of days. I didn't really think it was much of a debate. I thought Ohio State definitely deserved to be over them. They have 2 wins over CFP teams compared to Tennessee's 1. They both have 2 losses, one really good, one really bad. I didn't really think of it all that crazy. I understand that Ohio State didn't drop all that far after losing to a Michigan team, but at the end of the day, you got more data points this time of year. So going to fall quite as far later in the year than they would earlier because you don't have to be as reactionary. You have a full slate of games to choose from and to kind of pick from, and frankly, they should be looking at the full 12 slate when they're making these rankings, especially this late in the season. But moving on from that, Georgia, you're in a great spot. I think they could stay steady at the 7 seed, could drop to 8 depending on what happens this weekend. They're likely the 2 seed if they win the SEC. I don't think there's really any two ways about that. If they beat Texas, even if Penn State were to win or lose, they're firmly in the 2 seed spot. Notre Dame is 4 in the rankings, but 6 in the seeds when we get into this thing here in a second because of their conference situation. I don't think they could move up. I think they're pretty much set at that 6th spot or maybe even a little bit lower if Texas were to lose. I could see them kicking Notre Dame down one spot and Texas into that 6th spot, but definitely will be interesting to watch. And then Penn State, you're in the spot that you expected to be in. You're probably in the best spot in the entire tournament, frankly. If you lose this weekend, you have the 5 seed, and it's a very, very nice path. If you win this weekend, you might just be the 1 seed or at least the 2 seed and in a great position to move forward in this tournament. But let's talk about the actual bracket because that's what everyone's worried about right about now. It is SMU getting the bye is the only new thing here. You have Oregon, Texas, SMU, and Boise State. Those are your bye teams as of right now. You have Ohio State, Tennessee as of the 8-9 matchup. Makes total sense to me. I understand some people were pushing for Tennessee over Ohio State. I'm more leaned Ohio State, so understand where they came from with that. If the Tennessee receivers have to go up to Cole Columbus, that's going to be an interesting matchup. And frankly, I think that one might just be set in stone. I don't think that one's changing really. I don't see any real movement at those 2 spots. So I do think that one's relatively set. I think we will see Ohio State, Tennessee in Columbus in the playoff at the end of the day. UGA, Indiana is another one that I think could be set. If Georgia were to lose this weekend, I do think they would likely stay at that 7 position above Ohio State and be in a position to possibly play Indiana at home. maybe they could kick down a spot. Obviously, they could kick up a couple of spots if they were to win, but that would put them in the bye scenario, so not necessarily quite as impactful as a lot of the other things. I think Texas would maybe slide down to that 6th position, kick Notre Dame to the 7, and they would kind of play around with some different things from there. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Penn State, you're in the 5 position, and frankly, if this is your path forward, I'd rather be in your spot than Oregon's, if I'm being totally honest. If you're playing Arizona State and then Boise State, FanDuel released their odds actually on the Josh Pate show, and they would be favored by 11.5 against Arizona State, probably be favored by about 11.5, maybe 12 against Boise State. So they would be in really good shape. Oregon would have to play Ohio State or Tennessee in their second round. I'd much rather be Penn State in this scenario. Another issue with this format that we're rolling out there. So it is a huge issue. I would have Penn State as my 3 seed. I would have them as the other bye, and then I would have Notre Dame as the 4 seed. Understand that's not the way it works, but at the end of the day, I think this is one of the other examples of why this is likely not going to kick around for too long. We will likely have a very different format here pretty soon, and we'll see what happens then, but this is definitely a very broken setup. And then Notre Dame, Alabama, the one that everyone saw and got a little bit excited, although Alabama being in got plenty of people upset. I think this was a very fun matchup. It sounds like Notre Dame would be favored by a little bit more than a field goal, so definitely will be interesting to watch that one unfold. It's one of those games that just be 2 elite programs on one of the most storied fields in college football history. It would be absolutely incredible, and although it would be Alabama in the field where a lot of people would be upset, I would definitely be more than happy to watch that game. I think it would be so much fun to watch, and definitely one of those things where you're getting closer and closer to this thing. Feels like Notre Dame and Penn State are in really good positions. If everything goes chalk this weekend, this is going to be the bracket that you likely have. You're likely going to have all of these teams right where they are right now. Maybe there's a couple of different movements depending on the results, but the way that I see it, this is probably what you'll have if everything goes chalk this weekend. If Clemson wins, if some other things happen, if Georgia wins, if Penn State wins, there will be some movement in terms of seeding, but I think we have roughly the 12 teams. I think we have 13 teams. Well, we have more than that, but in terms of the spots that are being filled, I believe we have 13 teams for 12 spots. I think we're in a position right now where it really comes down to that ACC championship. If SMU loses, I do think SMU should be in. I can't promise that they will be. I do firmly think they should be in. And then there's some seeding stuff that we'll play around with. Bama could be out with a SMU loss. A lot of different things going into this rankings, and definitely gives us a very clear view. I don't think there's a lot of intrigue going into this weekend. We know what the group of 5 position is going to be between UNLV and Boise State. We know which one is going to affect a lot of stuff in the ACC championship, and we know it's Bama. One way or the other, it's going to be Bama in or Bama out, maybe SMU in or Bama out. It's going to be really interesting to watch all of this unfold. Definitely one of those things that we're getting closer and closer to this thing. People are getting madder and madder, as you would assume they would. But at the end of the day, going to be an incredible tournament regardless. We will obviously have Selection Sunday this upcoming Sunday, so we'll update that on Monday's show, no doubt about it. But we'll talk about that in more depth throughout the week. But let's take our first break here. When we come back, we got early signing day. We got to talk about all the stuff going on. We'll talk about the top classes, some classes to watch throughout the day, definitely some big-time flips and commitments that have already happened. And then we'll talk about a couple of people that you're going to want to watch throughout the rest of the day because they could find a way to flip towards the end of it. But we'll break it all down after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those CFP rankings that came out yesterday. Alabama's officially in the field. Sounds like the ACC championship is going to be the deciding factor if they are in or out. Clemson wins, they might just be out of that thing. If SMU wins, they're very firmly in it. So definitely going to be an interesting thing to watch. A lot of people are expressive about that decision. Let's just leave it at that for the time being. We'll talk about it more when Selection Sunday comes around. But early signing day is today. A lot of different things happening all around the recruiting world. We will not be able to touch on all of it right about now. We will get to a ton of it in this segment, but we'll likely do a follow-up on Friday, give you an idea of where everything's landed, at least for the time being, in recruiting, and then we'll continue to update you throughout the month. Obviously, a lot of stuff that is going to be going on, but what I wanted to start with this is just give you an idea of where everything stands, give you an idea of what the top classes are. We'll go through the top 10. I'll give you some teams to watch, and then we got some commitments. We got some flips. I'm actually waiting on one to go, and Michael Terry, the number one athlete in the country. We'll see what happens there. A lot of teams still very much vying for that guy, so kind of refreshing my phone over here. If you see me look over, apologies, but definitely going to be a huge day, so trying to keep my head on the swivel a little bit. But let's get into the top 10 teams. It is Georgia setting the pace right now. Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas. Those four teams have kind of separated from the field just a little bit. Auburn's not too far behind, but in terms of teams that you're seeing vying for that number one spot today, those are going to be your four teams to watch. It looks like Georgia is in a really good position to get a couple of big-time guys like Justice Terry, who we'll talk about here in a minute. Alabama's in a great position. Could lose Ty Haywood, a really talented offensive tackle, to Michigan. That's been something kicking around the pipes the last couple of weeks, so definitely something to watch there. He's committing later today. Ohio State, you're in a great position. A couple of guys that could find their way out of the program today. Neem Offord is a guy I'm watching very closely for Oregon and maybe Auburn. Definitely one to watch there. And then Texas, definitely a team that's going to be very active, I think, both directions today. I think there could be a couple of decommits. They've already signed a couple of guys, including Jamie French, that looked like he could be finding his way to Florida. He has officially signed with Texas, so a huge get for them. Locks up that guy, doesn't have to worry about that. So those are those four teams, kind of separating themselves from the pack. Those are the elite classes right about now. They will likely be elite at the end of the week, but definitely will be interesting to see how these kind of kick around. Maybe Alabama drops a little bit, maybe Texas rises a little bit. But then you do have Auburn, done a great job. This class is definitely one of those classes that is going to be filled with tons of talent. They obviously have to hit in the portal, still have to get that quarterback to bring it all together, but obviously they're doing a great job in the recruiting trail, and I expect them to finish this day strong. Quite a few players, including Naheem Offord and a couple other guys that might be kicking around towards Auburn, even if they just sign the guys that they have right now. It'll be an incredible class. For Oregon, a couple of guys that are going to be interesting to watch. Dallas Wilson, likely the most interesting. There was just a crystal ball, I believe, put in for him to possibly decommit and go to Florida. Definitely going to be something to watch as we go throughout this week. That's one of the most talented wide receivers in the country. Oregon locked him up a while ago. They lose him. That duo of DeCoria Moore and Dallas Wilson will be officially out the door. Definitely will be very interesting to watch. I think that's one of those players that you're definitely going to want in the building. Oregon's going to be pushing very hard, but Florida's still pushing very hard. I believe Miami's still in that thing, so it'll be interesting to watch throughout the day with that one. Michigan's the team that I'm watching very closely. I think they could kick up to the number 5 spot, even a little bit higher than that. They're a very, very good team, a very good program, and obviously putting together a great class. Obviously, bringing in Bryce Underwood was the start of that. They've really kicked up a gear. We talked about Ty Haywood. If they were able to flip him, would definitely kick them up just a little bit more, and I think they're going to be one of the teams that could have a ton to say about what happens today. Then you do have LSU, you have A&M, you have Tennessee, 3 teams that are doing work. Yeah, no craziness about these three classes right now. I think when you look at LSU, they obviously need a huge one. They've lost a ton of guys to the portal the last couple of days and definitely need a little bit of a reset in this one. Then you have Florida, Notre Dame, Miami, Oklahoma, Ole Miss right on the outside looking in. So definitely a couple of teams to watch there, but those are the top 10 that you have right now, and a couple to watch. To me, we talked about Texas. They're definitely a team that could find their way up to the number 1 spot, could lose a couple of guys throughout the process, but feels like they could be in for Michael Fasusi. We'll talk about him a little bit later, although that's kicking a little bit more towards Oklahoma towards the end of the process, but a lot of different things happening around Texas, and it feels like they're a team that could flip a couple of guys that we're not expecting as of right now. Michigan, we talked about them, the number 7 in the country. They are doing an incredible job right about now, and they're definitely trying to get a couple of flips as of right now. They have a lot of different guys that you have to like a ton in that class, and they're definitely a group that they were pushing for Jamie French, couldn't quite get them, but flipped a ton of guys from Florida State, flipped a couple of guys from Miami, has been really all over the place. And Florida is going to be a problem. Lagonza Hayward's another guy to watch who likely is going to find his way to Florida today. So a lot of different things happening around Gainesville and seem to be pretty good things. Georgia Tech is the number 18 class in the country. That is incredible. Number 2 in the entire ACC, only behind Miami. They're doing a really, really good job. They're bringing in a 5-star of Josh Petty at offensive tackle, the former UGA commit, and Christian Garrett at defensive tackle, Tay Harris, a former Clemson cornerback commit, and much more into this class. It's a really talented offensive line class with Brent Key there, and feels like this season has really kicked up a lot at Georgia Tech. Maybe it's one of those things where they're a program to watch in 2025. And then Colorado, obviously going to be a program to watch. Not really sure what players they're in for or out for. Definitely one of those things where you don't really know till it happens. We didn't really know about Travis Hunter till it unfolded on on National Signing Day. So a lot of things that could happen around Colorado. They're only second in the Big 12 right now, even though they're down all the way at 33rd. They're doing a relatively good job within that conference. And then obviously the portal is where they make their money. But let's get into a couple of guys you're going to want to watch throughout this next little bit, throughout the day, and we'll start with Cade Phillips. This is a couple of just flips that have already happened. Texas, he has flipped from Texas or to Texas from LSU. He was committed to Texas a little bit earlier in the process, found his way back. Obviously, LSU has had a little bit of a tough time on the recruiting trail right about now, and Texas is definitely benefiting. This is a very, very good player, definitely one of those guys that Texas wanted in the fold, and one of those guys that will help Texas possibly get that number 1 class at the end of the day. Lamont Rogers, a 5-star offensive tackle, has flipped from Missouri to Texas A&M. This is a beast of a human. 6'6", 311, definitely one of those guys that can be a pretty much immediate contributor. He is a huge guy and definitely one of those that you can bring in and immediately get. Missouri very badly wanted him in the class. A&M was able to steal him away, a huge get for them, and definitely kind of subsides a little bit of the pain of losing out on Michael Fasusi. They were able to get another elite talent at that offensive tackle position. Gavin Nix, a 4-star linebacker, has flipped from Miami to Oregon. Oregon gets a little bit of good news with Dallas Wilson possibly walking out the door. They get a very talented linebacker right here. Also, someone to watch is Naheem Offord, the Ohio State cornerback commit. Auburn, another one in for that guy. So a lot of different things to watch today. It looks like Miami is in a weird position going into today. I think they'll be more than fine if they sign the class that they have right now, but they've lost to quite a few guys, and Hilton Stubbs is another one. Miami to Florida in this one, a 4-star safety, really good player. One of those very instinctual, very kind of a center field type players. He is going to be a problem at the next level. I don't necessarily know if he's immediate starter or anything, but absolutely is an impact guy and definitely could be one of those guys that kind of takes Florida to that next level. They have so many different things going for them, and it didn't stop there. They got Joseph Mbachu, a very talented player, flipped from Florida to Texas after flipping from Florida to Texas. All over the place. This guy he was committed to Florida, flipped to Texas, flipped back to Florida. He's going to be a Gator. And it's definitely been a little bit of a crazy road, but a very, very talented guy and definitely one of those guys that can kind of fill out your lineup. You have the LJ McCrays, you have a lot of those talented guys up front. This is definitely a rotational piece, definitely could be a huge guy, and then later on in his college career could be an absolute beast at defensive line. Joseph Payton, very talented 4-star offensive lineman. He has flipped from Georgia Tech, to Georgia Tech, to Florida, to Georgia Tech from Florida State, Florida State is currently in a very bad spot. They are bleeding, and currently the guys that have left that class would be higher rated than the guys that have been or that are currently in that class. I believe their current class is sitting at 55 in the country. The guys that have flipped away would be sitting at 52 if you put them in a collective. Very tough times for Florida State. It sounds like they could be turning a corner today, but definitely something to watch as we get a little bit deeper in this process. They could be a program that you're a little bit worried about as we move a little bit down the road. Definitely something to watch there, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how all of this unfolds. Another big get for Georgia Tech, especially along that offensive line. Jordan Young, a 4-star safety, flipped from Michigan to Michigan from Clemson. I'm getting a little bit lost in my words, but Michigan's gearing up for a huge day. Bryce Underwood has helped that along, and definitely a very talented player that could help them along into that possible top 5 class that they're looking for. And then We talked about it at the beginning of the thing. Michael Terry has made his decision. It is going to be Texas for this player. Number one athlete in the country, likely a wide receiver / running back at the next level. Very talented kid. Nebraska was pushing very hard, so was Oregon at the end of the day. But Texas does win out on this one. Just got the notification over here. So Texas wins out on this one, continues to build that incredible class, and there could be a couple more on the way. And we'll talk about a couple of guys to watch. David Thomas Jr., the number one offensive tackle in the country, is signing at some point today. It's Tennessee right now. It could be Ohio State by the end of the day. He is flirting very aggressively with Ohio State, and definitely one of those guys. When I look at this class just overall, there are definitely a couple of quarterbacks that I love. This might be the most can't-miss prospect of the entire thing. He is an absolute beast at the offensive tackle position. I believe he's someone like 6'7", 315. He is a monster. He is going to be an immediate starter pretty much wherever he goes. Ohio State badly needs the offensive line help. Tennessee does as well. So we'll see what happens today. Definitely a very prized recruit, and whoever gets him, probably get an immediate starter at offensive tackle. Michael Fasusi is signing at some point today, the number 3 offensive tackle in the country. It looks like it's going to be Oklahoma. There was a couple of things kicking around that the Texas schools, A&M and Texas, were really pushing for this kid. Doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. I've seen a couple of pictures of, you see at this time of year of, oh, he's enrolled in the school, so he's locked in. It sounds like Michael Fasusi has enrolled in Oklahoma. I think he will sign there. Maybe there's a little bit of twist and turns, but the way that I see it right now, it seems like it's trending more and more towards Oklahoma as we get a little bit closer to that signing. Justice Terry is a guy you're going to want to watch a little bit later in the week. He's going to be on Friday, I believe at noon, when he's going to commit, and this is a very interesting one. It looks like it's going to be Georgia. A lot of the energy is towards Georgia. I mean, Georgia's totally dominated in that state after a little bit of a tough year last year. They've locked up the top 4 of the top 5 guys. This would be the last guy in the state of Georgia. Texas is the team to watch. They're the team that's kind of kicking around in the dark right now for Justice Terry. Maybe they could steal him from Georgia and continue to build out that class. Going to be a really interesting guy to watch. He's kind of shut down his recruitment, so we'll see what happens on Friday. Definitely one of those big-time dominoes that maybe Texas could steal from Georgia right before they play on Saturday. Jakeem Stewart, the number 1 defensive tackle in the country, he is committing today at noon. This is a game changer. This is a program changer. He's an absolute monster. It looks like LSU is kind of leading for him recently. They need this kid. If they can lock him up, if they can get him in this class, he will be an immediate starter. He will be a huge player for him like Dominic McKinley was this year. He is an absolute monster, can absolutely be a huge impact. And then USC is another team to watch here. I think it's kind of up in the air. I've seen a couple of USC things, seen a couple of LSU things. I think if I was to guess, I would say USC, but definitely still very much up in the air. One of those things where LSU just badly needs it. If they were able to get this guy in the class, it would feel a lot better this time tomorrow when they're looking at all the guys they have. Another offensive lineman here, Solomon Thomas, interior offensive lineman. Doesn't look like he's signing today. Looks like he is committing today at some point, so something to watch here. This is going to be a toss-up. I feel very, very confident that I don't think anyone feels confident about this one. LSU is very much in for him. Florida State feels like they could be pushing in that direction. Definitely something to watch there. It's definitely one of those things that Florida State's going to worry about this one until pen hits paper. He is committed right now to them. There's a lot of different flirtation all around the place. So I've seen Florida, I've seen LSU, I've seen Miami. We'll see what happens with this one. I think it's going to be a huge one, and Florida State badly wants to keep this guy in the mix. And then Lincoln Kerr, a very talented number 1 tight end in the country. This guy's an absolute beast. Definitely would be an immediate starter pretty much wherever he went. Committed to Kansas State right now. I think it's going to be Oregon at the end of the day. He's signing today at 1:30, so something to watch. All of this is Eastern time, by the way, just a little fair warning, but really remarkable player. It looks like it's going to be Oregon as we get closer and closer to this thing. Maybe Kansas State can stave them off, but as of right now, it looks like Oregon's going to win out. Definitely going to be a huge day for just about everyone in the country. It is a crazy day all around Twitter. It is a crazy day all around the world of recruiting, and we'll definitely update you on all of it when we get to Friday. We'll give you an update on everything, how everything sits right now. Maybe Texas can kick up to that number 1 spot. Maybe Michigan can kick up another couple of spots to the top 5. A lot of different things happening. The one name that I would watch very closely as you get throughout the day is Dallas Wilson, the very talented wide receiver committed to Oregon right now. I wonder if it'll stay that way. Florida's pushing really hard, Miami as well. I think Florida might just end up winning out for that one. If they do, that Jamie French loss will not feel nearly as bad as it does right now. So definitely will be very interesting to watch. We will update you on all of this stuff when it gets to Friday, but let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we got to talk about Boise State UNLV. It is a spot in the CFP on the line, so we got to give it the big game breakdown treatment. We'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about early signing day and how it's going to be absolutely crazy. A lot of different guys to watch. Dallas Wilson feels like the main guy to watch, one of the top wide receivers in the country, current Oregon commit. Will he be that at the end of the day is definitely a big-time question, definitely something to watch as we move throughout the day. It sounds like Texas has already kicked up a couple of spots with the Michael Terry recruitment, so definitely we'll update you on Friday with all of the movement and give you an idea of where everyone landed after a crazy day that is going to be today. But let's get into a little bit of a big game breakdown. We got to give love to Boise State UNLV. Don't want to shutter this one away, so wanted to give it a little bit of big game breakdown love, and it's one of the biggest games of the weekend. It is one for a spot in the CFP one way or the other. It's one of the three games that is you win, you're in, you lose, and you're all the way out. Definitely going to be a really interesting game to watch, and when you look at this game the first time around, it was very, very close. But Boise State was able to pull away. They were able to get a 4th and goal early in the fourth quarter, had a 14-play, 8-minute drive to finish it off. That was kind of all she wrote. Boise State was able to finish it, and now they're able to host UNLV this time around, and definitely will be a very interesting game to watch. But it's one of those games where Ashton Jeanty has been one of the most remarkable running backs all year. He's been absolutely incredible, one of the best players in the entire country, and will be in New York at the end of the year. Against UNLV the first time around, went for 128 on 33 carries, had a little bit of a slow start. It's happened different times throughout the year where he just gets better and better throughout the game because the defenders get a little bit more tired of tackling him throughout the game. But he was very solid towards down the stretch of that last game. Definitely would like to get off to a little bit quicker of a start in this one. If UNLV is going to be able to slow you down early, they obviously have the offense to put some points on the board. Although Boise State was able to slow them down last time, Malik Williams a little bit more comfortable in this offense this time around. Definitely something to watch as we get into this one. The UNLV run defense is 14th in the country heading into this one. They're only allowing about 104 rush yards per game. They're 15th in the country in yards per carry. Obviously, a lot of that stuff is going to kick up just a little bit with the way that Ashton Jeanty is playing, but Jackson Woodard, all those linebackers in the middle are going to be huge. He had 14 tackles in game one. Might just have to have more than that in this one. So, going to be a huge player there. On the other side, you have a rushing attack led by Malik Williams that is an absolute problem. He's really, really incredible. Got over 100 yards in game one when they played, but did have an interception, did get sacked 6 times. So want to eliminate some of those mistakes, want to be a little bit more deliberate with the football. If you can do that, if you can eliminate some of those mistakes, this UNLV offense is very, very hard to slow down. They do such a good job of staying in front of the stick, such a good job of stealing a lot of the eyes of the defenders. Becomes a really, really tall chore if you cannot take the ball away to stop this offense. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this because both these teams like to run the ball. That is not a mystery to anyone, but both these teams are very good at stopping the run. You have Boise State 6th in the country in rush yards per game. UNLV is 7th. But on the other side, Boise State is 12th in the country in rush yards allowed per game. UNLV is 14th. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be one of those things where maybe it just comes down to what happens in the pass game. And the defense and the pass defense is not good by any means. Both teams are below 100 in pass yards allowed per game, and Boise State's pass offense is 70th in the country. That's the biggest of the bunch. That's the top of the bunch in terms of the pass game. So it's not going to be one of those games where you see tons of deep balls, you see tons of big-time plays downfield. UNLV was able to hit a couple the last time they played, but probably not going to be that big of a factor in this one. But maybe it is that thing where they're at a stalemate in the run game. Maybe it is the couple of big-time plays over the deep part of the field where they're not all that comfortable making the plays, but maybe you're going to have to at some point this weekend. And then something to watch as well, turnover margin, UNLV is over 1 per game. Boise State about half that. So definitely something to watch. Boise State did win at 1-0 last time. If UNLV can take care of the ball just a little bit better this time around, definitely going to be a really interesting thing to watch. And I think when we're talking about the pass game, you got two guys, one on either side, that are going to be interesting to watch. Ricky White, one of the best wide receivers in the entire G5, one of the best wide receivers in the country, as far as I'm concerned. Over 1,000 yards in the year. 11 scores, and then you have Cameron Camper on the other side, a big-time player, definitely a huge player for them, especially as they key in on Ashton Genty. Need a couple of plays from this guy, 811 yards, 4 scores on the year. It definitely will be really interesting to watch what the pass game can do and what those two guys can do in this game. And the big question I have for UNLV is, can they not commit so many guys to the box? That was essentially what every single team did when they played UNLV, or when they played Boise State down the stretch of the season. Are they able to kind of pull a couple of guys back to the deep part of the field? Because when you talk about this Boise State offense, it's not a pass offense. It's not necessarily going to push you deep too often, but you commit 8 guys to the run, they're going to be able to make those plays. If you can put Maddox Madsen in kind of a weird spot where you only have 6 guys in the box, but you're able to stop the run, and then you have Maddox Madsen having to make a couple of plays with his arm, you're in a really good position if you're UNLV. Obviously, going to be one of those things where you want to make sure you stop Genty first and then figure out the rest of it later, but it could be huge if they don't have to commit 7 or 8 guys there. They only have to commit 6 or even 5, and then they can make a lot of plays in the run game. Probably going to be really tough to do that. If they're able to at least do that from time to time, it's going to be huge in this game. And then for Boise State, I think it's all about the second and third level players. It's all about the guys that are coming downhill from the safety position, from the linebacker position, because UNLV does an incredible job of stealing your eyes pre-snap. You have to make sure you have your feet where they're supposed to be. You have to make sure that your feet are under you, that you're not getting ahead of yourself, that you're not over pursuing, or you're going to have a lot of problems. And we're talking about a lot of the different things in this game. They've been relatively even, right? You have the rushing offense relatively the same, both top 10 in the country, run defense, both top 15, pass offense and pass defense, both not elite by any means. The one difference in this game could be red zone scoring. You have UNLV sitting at 89% in the for good for 32nd in the country. You have UNLV all the way back at 80%, 93rd in the country. Could be a huge moment in this game where if you can't turn it into 7 if you're UNLV, you're in a really tough spot, especially with the way that Boise State runs the ball. You definitely want to be able to finish off drives if you can. So this is a CFP matchup, no two ways about it. It's definitely for a spot in the CFP. If UNLV wins, they'll likely be that 12 seed. If Boise State wins, they could be the 3 or the 4 seed. So in a great spot as we go into this one. It's going to be a really special one. So let's talk about some players that have to rise to this moment. Matt Lauder is a huge player in this game, the Boise State tight end. When you talk about this Boise State pass game, it's a lot of one-read stuff. It's a lot of get the ball out, 3-step hitch, get the ball where it needs to go, where it's designed to go. This is a tight end that can make some of those plays. He can make some plays with the ball in his hands. He can do some of the things where you have a fake to Ashton Genty and then you get him out on the edge on a beneath route or on a drag, on different things that kind of get him out into open space. And then maybe you open a couple of things for Cameron Camper, for Latrell Caples, a lot of these talented receivers that you have. You need a guy over the middle of the field that can take those linebackers a little bit out of position, definitely give a little bit of more room to Ashton Genty, likely going to be the guy that has to do that. And then you have Sai Oladipo, a very talented safety for Boise State. This guy is all over the place. He's gotten 3.5 sacks on the year. He is a really remarkable player from the safety position. And we talked about it. The second and third level players for Boise State are going to be massive in this game. When you have a guy that can fly downhill like that and make the plays that he can, he's going to be huge. One way or the other, if he makes those plays or if he misses a couple of those plays and UNLV gets around him, it's going to be a huge player one way or the other on Friday, excuse me. Kylan James, the running back for UNLV, I think he's going to be massive. This UNLV run game predicates so much on rotating guys in and playing around with different formations and playing around with multiple running backs. So you talk about this guy, it's not just when he has the ball in his hands. It's sometimes he's a lead blocker on a play. Sometimes he's the guy that gives you the RPO option when he kicks out of the backfield and you fake the handoff to a guy like Jaden Thomas and then kick it out to Kylan James. A lot of really talented running backs on this team, and Kylan James is the guy that I think could open this up just a little bit for him. And then Jackson Woodard, maybe the most important player that is not named Ashton Genty in this game. When you talk about a guy that is at the very center of his defense that's making just about every single play you could possibly make, it's going to be this guy. He is hugely important in this game and definitely could be the X factor if UNLV was to win. But let's talk about keys to the game. We'll start with Boise State. I think you have to pace Genty's load just a little bit in this game. He has 312 carries on the year, over 1,600 yards after contact. He's been absolutely incredible. And it's not necessarily to say let him take a backseat in this game, because obviously it is the biggest game of the year, but it is to say you want to make sure you don't get him out of the gate too quickly. Those defenders are going to be very well rested early in the game. They're going to be very willing to give a lick to this kid. If you get him in a position where he's not getting better throughout the game, he's actually hurting a little bit in the fourth quarter, you're going to be in a really tough spot to try to finish this one out. Defensive discipline, a huge part of it. We talked about the UNLV pre-snap is a ton to deal with. A lot of different motions, a lot of different personnel groups, and you just can't overcommit. They have too many athletes on the outside at the running back and wide receiver position that you just cannot get yourself in a bad position. They have to stay disciplined. They have to keep their feet under them and then make a couple of plays on these running backs and wide receivers. Handling the moment, it's a huge moment for Boise State as a program. They're on the cusp of their first CFP berth, their first bye in the CFP. A lot of different things on the table for this program. Tons of pressure the last 12 weeks have been mounting. Can they keep their cool? Can they finish this off? Or can UNLV take the momentum they have, kind of playing with house money, and get a win here? UNLV, the Ricky White mismatch is going to be huge. He is an absolute difference maker on the outside, will be the second best playmaker in this game. And the Boise State back end, 123rd in pass yards allowed per game. Maybe it's just find this guy in one-on-one matchups. Maybe you can hit him deep a little bit more than I'm thinking right now, and it would be this guy if you were to. And he also just blocks kicks just for fun. He has 3 block kicks on the year. That could be a huge X factor in this game. And then Jaden Thomas's development has been huge. He only had 43 yards on 7 carries in the last game. He's topped 100 yards 3 times, has scored in every single game since then. He's going to be a huge factor in this game. It could be that that run game is a little bit more potent, a little bit more dangerous now that he has kind of come into his own and made some big-time plays for this team. And then you got to force passing downs. Maddox Madsen is not a guy that is going to outright beat you. He can definitely execute an offense. He can definitely make the plays they need to, but if you put them behind the sticks in a 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8 situation, this pass rush that has 36 sacks on the year is going to be able to get after that guy, is going to be able to cause mistakes, and then things get really interesting for UNLV in a hurry. And frankly, I've gone back and forth on this game quite a bit. I've toyed around with some different ideas. I'm going to go with the upset. I'll pull the trigger on this one. I think UNLV wins this game. I think they're coming in with a little bit of energy, a little bit of house money attitude as they go into this one. I think Boise State's going to be a little bit tight. I think they're going to be a little bit nervous. I think they're going to be a little bit just a lot of the pressure is going to get to them just a little bit here. I think UNLV wins this game. I think it's going to be a really fun one like the last one was, but I'm going to pick UNLV. I'm going to pick UNLV to get into the playoff and Barry Odom to put himself in a great position to get a head coaching job here pretty soon. But a huge game, obviously, one that I'm very, very excited to watch. But let's take our third break here. And when we come back, we got all the other Group of 5 title games. I want to give you breakdowns of all the other 4, and then I'll give you my picks for all the other 4 that very hard to get a beat on with how close these lines are. But we'll break them down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Boise State UNLV, the huge game that will send someone to the CFP from those two. I'm going to pick UNLV. I'm going to get a little bit crazy with it. I'm going to pick UNLV to win that game, to go to the CFP to avenge the loss earlier in the season. It's going to be a really fun one. No doubt about that, up there in Boise on Friday night. But let's get into all the other games. All the other G5 games that we got to talk about. Want to give them some love while we can. So let's get into these, and we'll start with that Conference USA game. Western Kentucky against Jacksonville State, a rematch of what we saw last week, and it was a very good one last week. Western Kentucky was able to get the win, send themselves to this game with a 50-yard field goal to finish it, a huge, huge one for them, and now it's one of those conferences that was kind of hard to get a beat on as we head into this year. It felt like Liberty was the team to beat. It felt like that was the team where a lot of the energy was going in that direction. It ended up being these two. Especially Jacksonville State, that kind of separated themselves throughout the year, and if you haven't watched Jacksonville State this year, they are tons of fun. Now, they're not necessarily going to throw the ball all over the field. They are going to run the ball about 2/3 of the time, but they're going to run for about 250 yards per game. Trey Stewart and Tyler Huff are a very, very elite duo at the running back and quarterback position. Tyler Huff is the big question here. He is a game-time decision for this game. Would be huge, one way or the other. Logan Smothers did come in the last game, 4 for 6, 62 yards passing, 5 carries, 32 yards, and a touchdown rushing. So he was more than fine. It's not necessarily like it's a steep drop-off, but when you play in one of these games, when you play one of these big-time games that you have to keep your cool about you tend to like to have that veteran guy. Tyler Huff is definitely someone they want on the field, and he would love to be on the field. There's no doubt about that. So it'll be really interesting to watch what happens there. That could be the X factor. If he's healthy, then I really like you could like Jacksonville State to win this game. If he's not, then things get a little bit more towards Western Kentucky in the grand scheme of things. But Western Kentucky is a little bit more balanced of an attack, a little bit more of a passing attack, roughly 50-50, but a little bit more of the bread is buttered, as it were, in the passing attack. 26th in the country in pass yards per game. Easton Messer on the outside for Caden Veltkamp is a very, very good duo. Those two guys are kind of in lockstep pretty much the entire day. And then in the run game, when they do utilize it, it's going to be Elijah Young. That's the guy you're going to want to watch for. 19 carries, 91 yards in the first matchup a week ago. Definitely is going to have to step up big again in this one, because the attack for WKU is going to be kind of interesting to watch. I think they can make some plays through the air. I believe Caden Veltkamp had 300 yards in the first game, did make a couple of mistakes. So it'll be interesting to see if they commit a little bit more to the run in Elijah, because he did have some success. You know, he has the ability to kind of make this a little bit of a slogfest, a little bit of a ground and pound type game, but definitely going to be a really fun game to watch. I really enjoyed this game last week, and I have to imagine it'll deliver again. But a big story in this one could be third downs. Jacksonville State went 2 for 13 on the money down last week. WKU went 7 for 20. That is a huge difference maker in this game. It could be one of those things where WKU is able to get them behind the sticks, put them in a bad spot, because you do that to this Jacksonville State team, they don't necessarily have the pass game to put you in a really, really bad spot in those 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 situations. So definitely something to watch. Can WKU put them behind the sticks and then get those passing downs that you very much want? Now, I think it's going to be a battle one way or the other. I think Jacksonville State's a little bit mad about last week. I think they're going to come out a little bit aggressive. I don't think Tyler Huff is going to miss this game. I think they're going to play really, really hard, and I think they do get the win. They win the Conference USA in rather dramatic fashion. After a crazy last week, they're able to get the win and move forward with that conference title. Tulane and Army, a game that we thought we were going to be much more excited for when this thing rolled around, but Tulane did fall to Memphis last week, and now it's just another game. Very, very excited about this game, though. It's going to be a really, really awesome one. Tulane obviously barely missed the mark on a CFP. Army was likely not really in the conversation down the stretch after that Notre Dame loss, but at the end of the day, going to be a really fun matchup, and one of these teams is going to win the American title, maybe Army in their very first year, but the offenses are very different in the way that they operate, the things that you'll see from them. They're going to run the ball, though. That is the way they make their money. Army over 300 yards per game, the best team in the country. Tulane is top 15 in 200 yards per game, with Mekhi Hughes leading the way in that run game. Bryson Daly on the other side for Army. Both are over 1,200 yards this year. Kanye Udo, a running back for Army, also over 900. A lot of really talented rushers in this game. Mekhi Hughes might be one of my favorite running backs in the entire country, and definitely a guy that can have a huge impact on this game. Both defenses can defend it, though, so that's going to be the big-time question. Army is fourth in the country, giving up less than 100 yards per game. They did give up 273 to Notre Dame, so could this be a little bit more leaning in that direction where Tulane just has bigger dudes? They have a little bit more beef to them, and maybe they can get some of the push that Notre Dame was able to. And then Tulane is 32nd in the country, giving up 125 per game. Obviously, they're going to have a little bit of trouble slowing down Army, but they did a great job slowing down Navy earlier in the year. So maybe that gives them a little bit of confidence going into this one. Obviously, a little bit different attacks from Army and Navy, but definitely relatively similar of the formations and the things that you'll see from them. So definitely going to be a really fun game to watch. Obviously, it's going to revolve around the run game. Maybe it is the pass game that makes the difference. Maybe it is Darian Mensah making a couple of plays and not making the mistakes against this Army back end. Maybe it is Army controlling the pace of play, because the time of possession in this game might just be the deciding factor. Both teams love to control it. Army's number 1 in the country in time of possession. Tulane's number 3. So they want to hold on to the ball. They both want to run the ball. They both want to wear you down. Which one can do it is really going to be the big question in this one. I think when you talk about that, when you talk about two teams that are going to run the ball really efficiently, are going to run the ball very aggressively, you got to look for the difference makers on the outside, and Tulane has them. I think when you look at Mario Williams, when you look at Dante Fleming and a lot of the other guys on the outside, it's going to be too much. I think Tulane has too many dudes. I think Tulane gets the win. I think they salvage a little bit of the season that they had, and I think they're in a really good spot going into 2025. Although they might lose their coach. But we'll talk about that in time. At Tulane, I do think gets the win, and John Summerall ends his first year at Tulane with a conference title. Over in the MAC, MACtion is coming to an end this weekend, and it is a battle for Ohio in this one. And we did get to see this one on October 19th. Miami of Ohio, was able to get the win 30-20. A really incredible game, and Miami of Ohio actually has not lost since October 5th. So they've been absolutely rolling right along. It will be a battle of styles, no doubt about that. Miami of Ohio, a little bit more of a conventional attack with Brett Gabbert at quarterback. Ohio with Parker Navarro, totally run first. That is what they're going to do. That is the way they make their money, and definitely going to be one of those things where maybe it's Ohio possessing the clock the entire time, a little bit of a bogged down game. Maybe Miami of Ohio can get a couple of takeaways. Maybe they can make some plays downfield and open this thing up just a little bit. But Ohio's 12th in the country when it comes to rush yards per game. Miami of Ohio all the way down at 85th, 134 yards per game. So going to be really interesting. Ohio only runs 40% pass plays, one of the lowest rates in the country. And when you have a guy like Parker Navarro at quarterback, it is not hard to see why. A very, very talented runner, one of those guys that can be a total difference maker for Ohio. On the other side, in the run game, Keon Mosey is the guy you're going to want to watch. A very, very talented player, one of the more talented playmakers in the entire MAC. Has over 1,000 yards rushing this year. So smooth, so shifty. Definitely a guy that you could be seeing in the portal here in a little bit. I won't necessarily speculate, but a very talented guy that I have to assume is getting a couple of looks from some bigger programs. Anthony Tyus is on the other side for Ohio at the running back position, over 1,000 yards or nearing 1,000 yards this season. Very talented player, and when you have him and Parker Navarro, a lot of confusion happens in that box for Miami of Ohio and for really every team that plays Ohio throughout this year. So it'll be interesting to see if Ohio kind of changes the way they defend Miami of Ohio in this game. Brett Gabbert was near perfect in this game. Keon Mosey went for over 100 yards. Brett Gabbert had 3 touchdowns passing. They'll probably have to play around with some different things, see if they can find where Miami, Ohio is attacking from, and see if they can kind of take that away just a little bit. On the other side, Parker Navarro really struggled in this game the first time around. 2 picks, a long run of 11 yards, got actually taken out of that game. It was very tough. He has been great since, but INTs have been an issue for him. Definitely will be something to watch, and I think it's going to be a really fun one. Whenever MACtion comes to an end, it's a little bit of a sad day, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be an awesome one to finish it out on, and I think Miami of Ohio has the guys. I think Keon Mosey is going to be a huge player in this game. I think when I look back at that past matchup, looks roughly about what these teams are. I think Miami of Ohio is going to be able to get this win, slow down that run game just enough, and walk away with at least a 4-point win, maybe a little bit longer than that, frankly. And then finally, the Sun Belt. We got to our final one here, and this is one of the most up and down conferences all year. It felt like coming in it was going to be JMU and App State, and then it was ULL pretty much the entire year. Louisiana fans. But Marshall with Charles Huff has done an incredible job, been one of the greatest stories in college football. Very interesting situation happening around there where his name's being brought up for a lot of G5 jobs. He doesn't have a contract at Marshall after this year. it's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out down the stretch. But for both these teams in this game, they both love to run the football. Both are top 32 in the country in rush yards per game. Neither defense is in the top 70 in rush yards allowed per game. So that could be the way that this game goes about. Bill Davis on the Louisiana side, A.J. Turner on the Marshall side, two guys to watch at the running back position that are going to be huge. The biggest difference maker on the outside, on the outside in this game is going to be Lance Lejeune, the wide receiver for Louisiana. Very talented athlete, former quarterback in the high school days, 700 yards, 6 touchdowns on the year. He's going to be a huge player in this one. Maybe he's enough of a difference maker to make the Marshall corners really hurt in this game, and definitely will be very interesting to watch. For Marshall, the very interesting thing that's happened this year is they've kind of had 2 years in one, sort of. They had 1 year that happened before the Georgia Southern game where they were 3-3. They were starting Stone Earl. Things were going a little bit not the way that they planned, and then they flipped to Braylon Braxton. They went 6-0. They played really good football, and protecting the football has been a huge part of that. Braylon Braxton's a huge rushing threat, but does not give the football away very often. He's got to carry a lot of weight in this game. When you have a defense that's given up 35 and 33 in the last 2 games, you're going to have quite a few points from your offense. Definitely will be something to watch in this game. And then, but this game is going to be really, really fun. Both teams like to play around with the quarterback run games with Ben Woolridge on one side and Braylon Braxton on the other. I think it's going to be pretty back and forth. I think these teams will get after each other just a little bit, but I really like this Marshall team. I really like what Braylon Braxton brings to them. I think they're a really dangerous team in the run game, and I think they'll be able to control the pace just a little bit more than Louisiana will be in this game. I'm going to pick Marshall to win the Sun Belt and pick Charles Huff to get a big-time win, and then figure out all the contract situation that's going on around there. Very interesting situation that we will obviously update you on probably a little bit later this week, maybe a little bit later next week. We'll see what happens there. I have to assume if he wins this game, they'll get a contract sorted out pretty quickly. If you were to lose this game, it'll be interesting to see what happens, no doubt about that. But we'll update you on that in time, and these games will be incredible to watch. Cannot wait to see all those unfold, and definitely a couple of those programs, including especially Boise State and UNLV, change for quite some time. This is going to be a huge moment for a lot of these programs, and definitely could be a huge moment where a lot of things change around those programs. But we'll break it down in time. We'll break down those games and talk about the impacts afterwards. But let's get into a couple of questions. To finish out the show here, we'll get into a couple of questions about the upcoming weekend, about all the craziness. What's the game of the weekend? What's the most impactful game of the weekend? A lot of different things we'll talk about right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those big-time games happening in the G5 this upcoming weekend. Some big-time championship games, especially that one over there in the Mountain West, could be a program changer for someone out there. But let's get into a couple of questions. As we get into this weekend, definitely want to ask a couple of the questions that are kind of just on my mind as we get into this weekend. Could be hugely impactful, and we'll actually start with that. We'll start with what's the most impactful title game of the weekend. We'll start with Boise State UNLV. This is a huge one, no two ways about that. The first 12-team playoff G5 spot, and definitely one of those things where it could really change a program. As crazy as that sounds, maybe it's a little bit grandiose, but a lot of recruits are about to see Boise State or UNLV on the biggest stage in the sport. They're about to see that program play for a possible national title. That is a huge deal. When you get into the recruiting world, when you get into these teams' house or these kids' houses, and be able to tell them that you will be able to compete for a national title and not be lying, that is a huge deal, and definitely will be a huge message sent for this game. And whoever wins it could take off in recruiting in a big time way. Arizona State and Iowa State, a huge one. Obviously, another spot on the line in this game. It'll be a little bit interesting to see what happens with the bye depending on the outcome. I would be surprised if they were able to get one. Maybe if Clemson were able to win and one of these teams were able to get it, but definitely will be interesting to see what happens there. It's going to be one of the more back and forth games that we have all weekend. This is the most impactful. There's no doubt about that. This is definitely the one. It could lead to a bye. It could lead to a CFP berth. It could lead to knocking Bama all the way out of the field. It could lead to a changed CFP format, if I'm being totally honest. If Clemson were to win this game, Alabama's knocked out of the field for SMU, I have to imagine the SEC would get together pretty quickly, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens from that. But I think this is the most impactful game of the weekend. All the others are for seeding in the tournament, definitely will be very impactful, but this is the one that could totally change who the teams are in the field as of right now. Who needs to step up to the moment is the other one that I have, because there's quite a few teams that can kind of flip that switch in this game. It happened with Bama last year, happened with Washington last year, where you said, okay, these are real national title contenders. Obviously, didn't go that well for those two at the end of the day, but they were able to kind of prove themselves on this weekend, at least beyond reasonable doubt. I think Texas can as well. They're still trying to find their way up to that Oregon level of football. They've been playing really, really good football the last little bit, have been kind of just doing their identity, doing what they're really good at, which is play defense, run the football, and they've been able to do it the last couple of weeks. This obviously will be the biggest test of the bunch against Georgia, but definitely going to be a huge moment. It could be one of those things where they assert themselves as the second team in that CFP race, in that national title race. They could be the difference makers on Saturday and be the team that we're all talking about when we roll around on Monday. SMU is another one. I think they're still getting doubted all over the place. I think there's still people that are looking at them and saying if they lose this weekend, they should be out of the field. They shouldn't be. They wouldn't compete with Alabama. I don't think that's true. I think this team is really, really good. I think they play more aggressive football than they're getting credit for. And I think those two linebackers in the middle, Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker, are some of the best in the entire country. This is a very, very good team. And I think they're one of the teams that, even when they get into the dance, I think a lot of people will want to draw them in the second round. They're a really dangerous group. And if they were able to beat down Clemson this weekend, a lot of people would take notice very quickly. Penn State is the winner for me, because this is the moment for James Franklin. You were given a second life by Ohio State and Michigan last weekend. Now it's kind of just taking uncharted territories, taking over it, being the team that goes and wins this weekend, possibly gets the number one seed in the CFP, is the number one team in the country going into that thing, and might be the team to beat. As crazy as that sounds, Penn State has everything in front of them this weekend. If they can make a statement and beat Oregon, a lot of teams will be kind of scared to play this team, and they're playing just about as good of football as really anyone in the country right about now. What is the game of the week? We talked about the most impactful one. What is the one that I'm most excited to watch? We got to start with Georgia-Texas. This is one that the last time it rolled around, it was Georgia just absolutely dominating this game for much of it. Obviously, Texas got in a little bit late. It was domination. Georgia absolutely controlled this game from start to finish. I don't think it's going to be like that this time. I think both are playing really great football right now. Obviously, Georgia had the tough performances defensively the last little bit, so definitely will be something to watch there. But I think when you look at this game, I think both teams are playing elite football. Both teams know that they have to show up on Saturday, and both teams are trying to get that bye if they can. So going to be a huge moment. If Texas is able to win the SEC in their first year, just go ahead and cover your ears and get ready for the craziness that will be the Texas fan base. But Boise State UNLV is going to be absolutely awesome. Like it was the first time around, Ashton Genty in this rushing offense for Boise State against UNLV, and that rushing offense is going to be really fun. For a spot in the CFP for just about everything, and I think the playmakers on the UNLV side are just so much fun to watch. Whether it's Jaden Thomas or Ricky White or Jacob DeJesus, a lot of really fun guys, and I think it's going to make for just an incredible game this upcoming weekend. This is the game that I'm most excited about. This is the one that I like the most. These are the teams that I've enjoyed the most this season. And yeah, I'm a little bit biased. I'll be totally honest. I love Arizona State. I love Kenny Dillingham. I love Iowa State. I love the juice that Rocco Becht brings. I love the duo they have on the outside. So these teams are really fun to me. And I think it's going to be incredible to watch what happens here. And whoever wins this one is going to be staring at a really terrifying field. There might be in that 12 seed, likely will be in that 12 seed, and then you might just be going on the road to play at Penn State or play in Oregon, and we'll see if they can rise to that moment. But this weekend, it's just about beating the team in front of you. The biggest question I have around Georgia is, what Georgia will we get? This is a question that has kind of kicked around a little bit, and frankly, I might just talk about it tomorrow, if I'm being totally honest, because I do think it might be one of the most impactful questions when you talk about the national title race, where Georgia can flip a switch. We've seen them do it a couple of different times this year against Clemson, against Texas, against Tennessee. We've also seen them play just downright bad football at different times. The first half against Alabama, against Ole Miss that entire game, against Georgia Tech for much of that game, especially the first half. So you're in a position where you got to be able to perform. You got to be able to show up this weekend and maybe not get that slow start that you've been kind of accustomed to getting, because then Texas can put up some points, and you've seen what that defense can do. So definitely in a really tough spot, and Carson Beck's going to have to lead the way. There's no doubt about that. Cannot make the mistakes that he did the first couple of weeks. Has been great the last couple of weeks. I believe 11 touchdowns, 0 picks in the last 3 weeks. He's going to be a huge player for this game, and definitely will be just a huge player as we move forward in the CFP race. But then you got the wide receivers. They can't make mistakes. They can't drop the ball. They can't do the things that have kind of held back this Georgia offense from being an elite group, being the group that can really be the enforcer in a lot of these games. They've been dropping way too many passes. They've been making too many mistakes on the outside, and that's going to be another difference maker. But at the end of the day, when we talk about this Georgia team, we can talk about the offense all we want. It comes down to this group. It comes down to the defense. It comes down to those guys flying around and making plays against the quarterback this weekend and beyond. You know, when you talk about this Georgia Kirby Smart team, it's always going to be about that side of the ball. You can have as many playmakers as you want offensively, and they do need that, no doubt about it. But if you want to win this game, if you want to dominate this game the way you did the first time around, it's going to be about that defense. It's going to be about that pass rush, getting after Quinn Ewers, affecting him the way that they did in the first matchup, and the defensive line, holding up against this really elite offensive line that is officially a finalist for the Joe Moore Award and is running the football incredibly well. So definitely going to be one of those things where Carson Beck's going to be huge. The wide receivers are going to be huge. People stepping up for Trevor Etienne in his absence is going to be huge. The defense is the biggest part of this team. It will be the biggest part of this team until Kirby Smart leaves there. Period. End of story. Going to be a huge moment for them, and definitely one where you're going to have quite a bit of stress put on you by this Texas offense. And then the question for the Heisman ceremony is, the guys sitting this week, does that hurt them in this process? Because it is a conversation just around this time every single year where you have one guy in Ashton Jeanty that is at the very top of the Heisman voting that is playing this weekend, and he's looking to play a great game, looking to kick himself up in the Heisman rankings. And then you do have Travis Hunter sitting on the sidelines of this weekend just hoping that his team was going to be able to play. They obviously missed the mark just a little bit. Will that affect him in the Heisman voting? And I think the question for Ashton Jeanty is, can you really leave a huge impression? You know, you're going to be playing kind of alone. You'll obviously have a couple other games going on, but you were the main event on that Friday night. A lot of people will be watching you. A statement would mean a lot. I'm not necessarily saying he would totally change votes if he went for 250 and 3 scores on Friday, but I am saying there are a couple of people that are very swayable. There are a couple of people that are very reactionary. You put the last result on tape in championship weekend, I think you could get a couple of guys. I'm not necessarily saying it would change the result of the race. I do think it could change the margin of the result by quite a bit. So definitely something to watch. But more than anything, we talk about Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. Will it affect Cam Ward? Cam Ward is currently, as I see it, the number 3 person in this race, but at the end of the day, Dylan Gabriel's playing this weekend. A lot of guys are playing this weekend that are right there behind him. Cam Scadaboo, another guy to watch for this weekend, where if Cam Ward, isn't playing this weekend and Ashton Jeanty does something crazy, and Dylan Gabriel does something crazy, and Cam Scadaboo does something crazy, could Cam Ward be left out of New York? I don't think that'll happen, but I definitely think it's one of those situations where you get to leave your last impression. The guys that are on the field this weekend, in Dylan Gabriel, in Ashton Jeanty, get to leave that last impression, while Cam Ward, while Travis Hunter have to watch. And it'll definitely be interesting to see what the impact of that is, and it'll be interesting to see if Ashton Jeanty or a couple of these other guys can take advantage of the opening that they're going to be given this weekend. And then finally, the individual matchup of the week. One of my favorite segments we do, because always love to get a little bit deeper of a look in this thing. And Carson Beck against that Texas secondary is going to be huge. They forced 3 turnovers from him the first time they met. They're one of the best pass defenses, maybe the best pass defense in the entire country. Carson Beck has been absolutely great. Texas is going to be much better in terms of disguising coverages, in terms of guys dropping into coverage from the linebacker position. They are a ton better at that than a lot of the teams that Georgia has played over the last couple of weeks. Going to be really interesting to watch if Carson Beck can keep that level of play, or will the windows be a little bit tighter? Will they be a little bit more condensed? Because even Tennessee is an attackable team on the back end. Texas is not quite to that level. So definitely something to watch, where maybe Carson Beck can take over this game the way he has been able to the last couple of weeks, or maybe he's going to revert back to that old form against this really good back end and make a couple of mistakes that Texas can take advantage of. And then Cam Scadaboo against this Iowa State front seven is going to be huge because Iowa State is not necessarily the greatest at stopping the run by any means. I believe they're below 100 in the country. This front seven has some dudes on it, has some players that can make some plays. Cam Scadaboo's a load to take down. It's going to have to be a lot of guys committing to the run, especially without Jordan Tyson in this game. You can commit a couple of more guys to the run, and Cam Scadaboo is going to have to step up to the plate. It's going to be a huge matchup that could just downright decide this game one way or the other. And then Ashton Jeanty against this UNLV defense is going to be so much fun to watch. The best running back in the country, one of the best run defenses in the country, a spot in the CFP on the line. It's about as good as it gets. It's going to be incredible to watch that one unfold, and definitely one of those things where can the UNLV defense have the stamina to keep up with Ashton Jeanty throughout this game? He is more than fine to take 33 carries and just wait for you to tire down. Going to be really interesting to watch that unfold, and UNLV's defense is going to have the toughest test that they've had all year, and they already faced Ashton Jeanty. I think this might just be a little bit tougher with how good this Boise State defense or offense is operating right about now, but it's going to be an incredible week. So many different things happening all around the country this week. Obviously, early signing day happening today. We will update you on all the craziness. I believe Texas actually kicked up to the #1 spot as I was talking on this show. So a lot of different things happening throughout today. We will talk about it on Friday. We will break down all of the craziness of this past day. And then we got conference championships coming up. We got the portal going crazy. We got coaching carousel. We will keep you updated on all of it. I promise you that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening. I will be back tomorrow for every single breakdown of all the Power 4 conference champions. So I'll see you there tomorrow. Thanks for listening, and I will see you guys back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow.